Before this story begins, tell me in the comments, have you ever been made to feel less than at a family event, even after giving everything you could to make it happen? I'll never forget the way the sunlight streamed through the grand windows of the Rosewater estate that afternoon. It should have been one of the proudest days of my life. My only daughter, Clara, walking down the aisle. I had been saving for years to give her the dream wedding she always wanted. I covered the catering, the flowers, the venue deposit, even the custom cake flown in from Paris. Every detail was perfect. At least, that's what I thought, until the reception seating chart was revealed. When I approached the list, my smile faltered. I wasn't at the family table. I wasn't near the stage. I wasn't even with my friends. No, my name sat under table 14, wedged between two distant relatives I barely knew and the plus ones of Clara's coworkers. In other words, the cheap table. The one farthest from the dance floor, so close to the kitchen doors you could smell burnt bread. For a moment, I thought it had to be a mistake. I approached Clara's new mother-in-law, Vivian, who seemed to be practically glowing with satisfaction. "Oh, don't worry, dear," she said with a saccharine smile. "We just thought you'd be more comfortable back there. Less pressure, you know? Those front tables are for close family and important guests." Important guests. As if I wasn't the one who paid for half this wedding? As if I was just an afterthought. I swallowed my anger and sat down at table 14, my dress pooling around me. But as the speeches started and I saw Vivian, her family, and even distant friends of the groom seated right up front, where I should have been, I realized something. This wasn't a mistake. This was a message. And I was about to send one back. The first toast came from Vivian. Of course it did. She stood at the microphone, in her glittering champagne gown, smiling as if she were the queen of the evening. She went on about family unity and how blessed we are to welcome Clara into our family, conveniently skipping over my name entirely. Not a single word about the years I raised my daughter on my own. Not a single acknowledgement of the fact that I'd been the one who paid for the very dinner they were enjoying. Every polite smile at table 14 felt like a dagger. I could almost hear the whispers, "Why is she sitting back here?" I kept my face calm, but inside I was already calculating. I wasn't going to throw a tantrum or storm out. No, that's what they'd expect. Instead, I decided to do something memorable. I waited until the servers brought out the main course, lobster tail and prime rib for the front tables, basic chicken breast for the rest of us. That's when I quietly excused myself and walked to the coordinator, a young woman named Elise, who had been my contact through the entire planning process. "Elise, I think there's been a little mix-up with the seating. Can you check my invoice?" She looked confused, but I could see the moment her eyes landed on the paperwork in her binder. Her expression shifted from confusion to horror. You see, I hadn't just paid for part of the wedding. I'd paid for the premium service package, the one that included priority seating for my chosen guests, unlimited champagne service, and the best meals on the menu. Which meant the prime rib and lobster, that was my bill. The front table they gave to Vivian's friends, that was supposed to be mine. And Elise, bless her, was about to find out just how wrong they played this. Elise's hands trembled slightly as she flipped back through the signed documents. Her voice was almost a whisper when she said, "Mrs. Hawthorne, you're right. This seating assignment isn't what we agreed upon, and your payment covers the premium meal service for up to 20 guests. I leaned in, lowering my voice so only she could hear. Then I think it's time my guests get what I paid for. 5 minutes later, the shift began. The servers, following Elise's quiet instructions, carried trays of lobster tail and prime rib past the important front tables and straight to table 14. The aroma alone turned heads. Vivian noticed first. Her smile faltered as she watched my table receive champagne refills, imported truffles, and fresh roses in our centerpiece, none of which her table had. She leaned toward the event manager in a sharp whisper, but the woman simply pointed to Elise, who pointed to me, and I smiled. By the time dessert arrived, flambéed at our table, while the rest of the room got basic cake, the whispering had turned into open stares. A few of Vivian's friends even started drifting over to our side to say hello and sample a bite. It was then, in the soft glow of the reception lights, that I decided to take it further. When it came time for the parent speeches, I rose from my seat, not from the far corner where I'd been hidden earlier, but from the spotlight table we now commanded, and walked straight to the microphone. The entire room fell silent. "Good evening," I began, my tone polite but steady. "Some of you may not know me, but I am Clara's mother. And while tonight is about love and family, it's also about remembering who stood by you when times weren't so easy." I let that hang in the air, watching as Vivian's eyes narrowed. Then I smiled, sweet as sugar, and added, "And I am so grateful to celebrate from the table I paid for." Gasps rippled through the room. The tension broke into a mix of awkward laughter and murmurs, but one thing was clear. Everyone knew exactly what I meant. I stepped down from the microphone, the clinking of my heels echoing louder than the polite applause that followed. Every pair of eyes followed me, not back to the dim corner where I'd been hidden earlier, but to the newly crowned centerpiece of the reception. Vivian's smile was gone entirely now, replaced with that brittle, tight-lipped expression people wear when they've lost control but are trying desperately not to show it. And I wasn't done. Elise caught my eye as I returned to my seat, and with the faintest nod, the next part of the plan fell into place. The servers began quietly rearranging the seating chart, escorting my friends and relatives from the other scattered cheap tables to ours. Within minutes, the table was surrounded by laughter, warm conversation, and clinking glasses, while the front tables, once brimming with Vivian's allies, looked half empty. I noticed the photographer hesitating near the head table, unsure where to focus now that the real energy had shifted. I waved her over. "Could you get a photo of us?" I asked sweetly. "It's rare that we're all together." The camera flashed. Once. Twice. The image that would later make the rounds on social media was a masterpiece. Our table glowing with candlelight, smiles genuine, plates overflowing with the finest food. Meanwhile, Vivian's table sat stiff and quiet, their plates picked over and their champagne flutes empty. I could feel the power balance shifting in real time. That's when I decided to add one final touch, a move that would make sure no one ever dared to sideline me again. I signaled Elise. "Bring me the invoice folder," I murmured. When it arrived, I stood again, holding it casually in my hand. "Oh, one last thing," I said into the microphone, my voice warm but cutting. "Since this wedding was partially sponsored by my contribution, I think it's only fair everyone sees just how much love and resources I've invested in this beautiful day. Gasps again, all eyes on me. I opened the folder, ready to reveal exactly who had made this wedding possible and why I wasn't the woman to be quietly humiliated. The room was silent, save for the soft hum of the chandelier above us. Every single guest seemed to lean forward, their curiosity pulling them toward me like a magnet. I opened the folder slowly, letting the anticipation grow. Inside were neatly stacked invoices, contracts, and receipts, meticulously organized. I held up the very first page so the audience could see the bold heading, Final Balance Paid in Full, $46,720. This, I began, my tone calm but unmistakably firm, is the total I contributed to make this day possible. Not just the flowers, not just the dress, but the venue you're all sitting in, the music you're dancing to, and yes, the champagne you're sipping. A ripple of murmurs swept through the tables. I let them whisper, let them process. I don't say this to boast. I say it because when someone makes an investment of this size in time, love, and resources, it should be met with gratitude, not banishment to a table near the kitchen. Heads turned toward Vivian, whose face was now an alarming shade of red. She opened her mouth, but I didn't give her the chance. And so, I said, glancing around the room, I will be relocating this cheap table to its rightful place, front and center, where I can properly witness my daughter's happiest day. Anyone who feels they belong here is welcome to join me. The shift was immediate. Chairs scraped against the floor as guests, some reluctantly, others boldly, rose and followed me. My table swelled with people eager to be part of whatever this turning tide was. By the time I sat down again, Vivian's table looked like a battlefield after the retreat, half empty, quiet, and tense. I sipped my champagne, meeting her glare with the smallest, most satisfied smile, because this wasn't about a seat. This was about respect, and I'd just taken mine back in front of the entire family. Vivian's fork clattered onto her plate. She stood so quickly her chair tipped backward with a loud clunk, drawing every pair of eyes back to her. "Well," she began, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes, "it's lovely that some people think waving receipts around is appropriate during a wedding reception. But since you've made this about money, let's be honest." She took a step forward, voice growing sharper. "You didn't do this out of love. You did this so you could brag, so you could make sure everyone knew you were the one pulling the strings." I stayed seated, my hands calmly folded on the table. "If I wanted to pull the strings, Vivian, I wouldn't have paid for you to hold them." Gasps, a few stifled laughs. Vivian's nostrils flared. "You always have to be the center of attention, don't you? Well, guess what? No one's impressed. You might have paid for the venue, but you didn't pay for class." The room went utterly silent. My daughter shifted uncomfortably at the head table, eyes darting between us. I stood slowly this time, letting the moment stretch, my heels clicking softly against the polished floor as I walked toward her. When I reached Vivian, I lowered my voice so the entire room had to strain to hear. "You're right, Vivian. Class isn't something you can buy. It's something you show when you know how to treat people with respect. And for the record,
I didn't want to be the center of attention tonight, but you made sure I had no choice." A ripple of applause started, soft at first, then louder, spreading across the room until even the band members at the back were clapping. Vivian's face crumpled just slightly before she forced it back into a stiff smile and returned to her seat. It should have ended there, but the look in her eyes told me she wasn't done. Not yet. Vivian sat rigid in her seat, the kind of stillness that made my instincts buzz. I knew her well enough to recognize silence wasn't surrender. It was plotting. Sure enough, a few minutes later, she slipped away toward the back of the room, pretending to check on the dessert table. I watched from across the dance floor, pretending not to notice as she leaned close to the DJ booth. The DJ, a young man in his 20s, looked confused but listened as she gestured toward the seating chart displayed near his stand. He nodded once, probably assuming this was part of the bride's instructions. And then I realized what she was doing. Vivian was trying to switch the music and mic time to make an announcement, one she hoped would humiliate me in front of everyone. But her fatal flaw? She never factored in how many people in this room liked me more than her. As she whispered her instructions, the maid of honor, bless her bold little heart, slipped up beside me and whispered, "She's asking him to announce that you'll be leaving early because you've caused enough drama for this night." Oh no, not tonight. I stood and walked directly toward the DJ booth, every step deliberate, my gown sweeping across the floor. The DJ noticed me approaching and instantly looked nervous. "Before you make that announcement, why don't we change the plan a bit?" I reached into my clutch and handed him a folded card, the one I had prepared earlier with a surprise toast for my daughter. "This is what you'll read, and when you do, play 'Isn't She Lovely' right after." The DJ grinned, relief flashing in his eyes, and nodded. Vivian's jaw tightened. When the announcement came, instead of her little ambush, the DJ read my heartfelt words to my daughter about her courage, her kindness, and the life she was building. People teared up. The applause was thunderous.
And then the song kicked in. My daughter grabbed my hands, pulling me into a dance, while Vivian stood on the sidelines, outmaneuvered and seething. But the night wasn't over. I could feel it. Vivian had one more card to play. The night had begun to settle into that warm, golden glow weddings get after dinner, when people are full, happy, and the champagne has softened everyone's edges. But I could still feel Vivian's energy slicing through the air like a cold draft. She wasn't done. I spotted her across the room speaking with my ex-husband's sister, another one who had never hidden her distaste for me. The two of them stood too close, their heads bent, their eyes flicking in my direction, and then I saw Vivian hold up a champagne flute and point to the stage. Oh, so this was it, her final act. The MC, clearly prompted by her, tapped the mic. "We have one more speech before we open the dance floor." Vivian stepped onto the stage, all smiles, but I knew better. She began innocently enough. "I just want to say how proud we all are of the beautiful bride and her unconventional family story." There it was, the loaded word, unconventional. Her voice took on that syrupy tone only people with poison in their hearts can manage. It's not every day a woman can raise a daughter alone and still find someone willing to take them both in. The crowd's polite smiles began to fade. My daughter's jaw tightened. My son-in-law's mother frowned. Vivio thought she was weaving a clever insult disguised as a compliment, but she didn't realize she was digging her own grave. I rose from my seat slowly, deliberately, and walked to the edge of the dance floor.
The room was silent, except for the mic feedback. "Vivian," I called out, my voice calm but carrying, "I'm so glad you brought up our story, because it's one worth celebrating." Gasps fluttered across the room. I stepped up beside her, took the mic, and smiled. "Yes, I raised my daughter alone. Yes, we faced struggles that some of you will never understand. But everything she is today, her kindness, her strength, her success, comes from that journey and from love, real love. The kind you can't fake, buy, or sabotage." Applause began to swell, first from the bride's table, then from the back, until the whole room was clapping. Vivian froze, caught in the spotlight, unable to retreat without looking like she'd been defeated. And in that moment, my daughter walked up, hugged me in front of everyone, and whispered, just loud enough for Vivian to hear, "You'll never sit at the cheap table again." But little did I know, Vivian wasn't the only one watching that night. Someone else, someone I hadn't seen in years, was standing in the shadows, and they were about to change everything. As the applause finally died down, I caught a movement near the back of the room, someone stepping just slightly out of the shadows. Tall, broad-shouldered, an air of quiet authority that made people instinctively clear a path for him without even realizing it. And then my breath caught. It was Michael Grant. The Michael Grant, my late husband's oldest friend and business partner from decades ago. The man who had disappeared from our lives after my husband's passing, swallowed by rumors of betrayal and corporate battles I never had the full truth about. He was older now, silver streaks in his hair, but his eyes, those piercing gray eyes, were exactly the same, and they were locked on me. Vivian noticed him too. For the first time all night, her smirk faltered. She shifted uncomfortably on her heels, and I could see the recognition dawn on her face. Michael began walking toward the stage, each step deliberate, as if the entire room was holding its breath. When he reached us, he didn't acknowledge Vivian at all. His gaze stayed on me. "I wasn't sure you'd remember me," he said softly, but the microphone picked up enough for the whole room to hear. "Oh, I remember," I replied, my voice steady but my heart pounding. "The last time I saw you was the night everything fell apart." His jaw tightened. "And I've spent every year since then trying to make it right." The crowd murmured. Even the band had stopped tuning their instruments. Michael turned to the audience. "You all don't know this, but the woman standing here didn't just raise a daughter on her own. She held together a company that should have been hers, a company her husband built that others stole from her while she was grieving." Gasps. Heads turned. Vivian shifted again, her hand gripping the champagne flute so tightly I thought it might shatter. Michael continued, "I've come tonight to return what was taken and to make sure everyone knows exactly who Eleanor is and why she'll never sit at the cheap table again." And then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a sealed envelope. I didn't know it yet, but inside was a document that would change everything for me, for my daughter, and for Vivian.